Hello, welcome to the live. So on today's live, I'm going to talk about books for Family Caregivers Awareness Month, which is this month, the month of November. And so I'm going to talk about three. Two are adult books and one is adult graphic memoir. All of these three books are actually memoirs. I thought a lot about how I was going to do this live because when it comes to caregiving, there's a lot of books out there, a lot of different genres. Some are more like informational, some are more like self-care, self-help type books, and then there's also memoirs. And I'm a huge fan. If you've watched my videos before, you know that memoirs and biographies are one of my favorite actually types of genres. And so I chose to go with the memoirs route because caregiving can feel really isolating, and there's sometimes this aloneness and this alone struggle, and sometimes people not understanding, sometimes others not saying the most helpful things, not that they're intending to do that, but they just don't know how to respond. So when it comes to books, and at least for me, like one of the biggest reasons why I'm so connected with books and why I am doing my podcast is that I always found a lot of comfort in books. And sometimes it's nice reading like real stories of other people who have gone through a similar struggle. And I feel like, with something like caregiving, like reading a memoir, if you've experienced it or if you know of anyone that has, or maybe that are currently caregiving or are preparing to, these would be some good books to explore. So I'll go through each one by one as usual. So the first one is Wherever You Are, a memoir of love, marriage, and brain injury by Cynthia Lim. I am almost done with this book. I have like a teeny bit more to go. And this book is really good. So this book, the author is Asian American, and she's actually retired from the Los Angeles Unified School District and holds a doctorate in social welfare. So she works in education more on the administrative level. And with this book, what had happened was she ended up becoming a caregiver for her husband. And it was very unexpected. So her husband had suffered a cardiac arrest, and which then led to brain injury because of just the nature of the type of cardiac arrest, and then how it leads to unconsciousness and sometimes like lack of oxygen flow to the brain, like it's going to cause some brain damage. So this happened unexpectedly while they were on a trip. So this book talks about her experience with that, and then everything that had followed, including how just, her and her husband had a very like heartwarming like history. Like they'd been together since they were younger. They were like friends first, and then they were in a relationship, and they got married, and they had kids. And she, worked in education, and he was an attorney, so he was very successful. And they just had like a really great like collaborative like relationship, super supportive, and there was of course a lot of love. So whenever there is a loved one that ends up becoming disabled and then needs the caregiving, just that alone, there's like a lot of grief involved. So she ends up that and kind of just this new way of being with her husband who isn't, who needs assistance. He's not able to do things he used to do, and then even just some communication difficulties because of the neurological challenges that were experienced. So this talks about her experience with that component on top of navigating just the whole health insurance stuff, which if you've picked up any books on how to maneuver that when it comes to like, here's things to do as far as like legal wise, insurance wise, or if you yourself have gone through it, or you know someone, you've like watched them kind of try to navigate that whole health insurance thing, it is in itself like its own monster, and it's super, super stressful, super, super confusing. And so she talks about her experience with that, on top of just this kind of conflict with him being in a facility and then coming home. So with being in a facility, there's one thing where it's like missing them, like they're not there, like you want to make sure like that and feel good about where they are, you know, and then just struggling with them, like they're being taken care of but still being alone. And then like there's also the other end where it's like, okay, maybe they can come home at some point or working towards that, and then all the stuff that's involved with in that, because then it essentially turns into 24-hour care for the family that's living in the household. So it's good, but it's also super stressful. And then the facility, it can be helpful, but it's also there's like an emotional component that's super hard. So she talks about all that, and amazingly, she like worked full time as she was navigating this whole caregiving process, which is like amazing. Like the amount of strength that would take, because just one of those things on its own is like a lot of work. So I can't recommend this book enough. I think it was really, really cool to read, and I'm almost done with it, a story about like a spouse, and it's cool. It's also Asian American author, which makes my Asian American heart really excited. So yeah, so I would definitely recommend this if you yourself have been a spouse or a partner in caregiving, or you've maybe watched a parent, or just if in any way you resonate with it, I would say definitely check out this book, Wherever You Are by Cynthia Lim. So the next one is, I finished this earlier today, and similar name but different, Welcome to Wherever We Are, a memoir of family, caregiving, and redemption by Deborah C. Cohan. Isn't that a pretty cover? So the author of this book is a professor of sociology, and she also has experience working in like intimate partner violence, like domestic violence DV groups. So she's really familiar in that. She does trainings on it, teaches others about it. And this book was interesting. When I first came across the synopsis of this book, I thought, okay, like I need to read this, because I don't know if there's a lot of books that talk about the complexities that are in this book, but either way, I was like, yeah, I need to read this. And so essentially what this is so she's an only child, and she talks about her experience caregiving for her father. Her father had a fall and sustained a hip injury, and then after that, just health-wise, just really started to decline. The complexity of it is their relationship, and that her father was abusive and controlling, especially like verbal psychological abuse, and then controlling, but also moments of like nice memories and like positive behaviors from dad. So it's kind of like both, and I think that's where like the control factor, is a part of it. But either way, I thought it was interesting because this is her story about being the caregiver for a parent who has where there's like a history of abuse and control. So, we don't oftentimes think of this, but when it comes to caregiving and caregiving for someone where you have a long history with, especially a parent, a lot of stuff comes up, a lot of memories, like it brings up a lot of emotions. And in the case of this book, part of those pieces and part of those memories are also like memories of how she was spoken to, and how her father had treated her at times. So it made the caregiving super, super complicated, just like on an internal emotional level. So I thought it was interesting that she talked about that. I'll read you something on the book jacket. So essentially shares her story for caregiving for her father, a man who was simultaneously loud, gentle, loving, and cruel, and whose brilliant career as an advertising executive included creating slogans like, "Hey, how about a nice Hawaiian punch?" So that's just kind of like a brief intro of some of the things, that, she heard her father say. So it definitely talks about some complicated family dynamics, how it also understandably influenced her relationships, like her romantic relationships. And so this book was really, really good. And like I said, I haven't heard a lot of books around the topic of like abuse and caregiving, which I think is super important. And what else? So in the end, I'm not going to spoil it, but essentially, when it comes to grief, and essentially when we think of grief work as therapists and like grief therapy, it's kind of like there's both, like there's those not so great memories, and then there's also like positive memories. And so this book is kind of how she kind of makes sense of it in relation to the loss of her father. So yeah, I would highly, highly recommend this book if you yourself have a complex relationship with a parent or caregiver, or someone who's caregiving for you and now you're caregiving for them, or if you know of anyone, or you just want to know more about what that may be like in the future, if that's something you are preparing for, because I think as adults, this is something we are all kind of preparing for as parents, and what this is going to look like when we end up taking over that parenting role. And if it's very complex, then this book may definitely provide a lot of insight. And she also does bring a lot of her knowledge and skill as a person who trains and works with intimate partner violence and DV work. So that was also good, because there were nuggets of just good information and other educational information. So yeah, that is Welcome to Wherever We Are by Deborah C. Cohan. The last book, I'm halfway through. So this is a graphic memoir. It's called Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant by Chast. So this, kind of going off of what I just talked about, is we're all adult children are kind of preparing for that caregiving role, right? To be the parent of their parents, essentially. And so this book is just about that, and it's a graphic memoir. So there is a lot of text, but there's also, it's predominantly, and there's some pictures, I forgot about that. Mainly graphic and novel, to kind of say what it was like. And so this is essentially, and you can tell by the cover, this was literally one of the panels too in this graphic novel was, kind of having this conversation with your parents about taking over the responsibilities, or where's your paperwork, can we get things set so I just know where things are. And then her bringing up, and one of the panels is the parent saying, can't we just talk about something more pleasant? So wanting to avoid the topic. And if you've ever been around your parents, who spoke to your grandparents about this, or if you've already done this already, how at first it's kind of dodging the subject because it's uncomfortable, right? It's not something that either party is really feeling great about, but it's something that is helpful. So essentially this book is about when the adult child does take over the parent role, and a lot of components in that timeline, which is kind of thinking about that in general, and then kind of trying to have the conversation, trying to be more of the lead and in more take a more responsibility type role, on top of thinking about what to do if things decline. And in this case, the father ends up experiencing dementia, and so there's that. And either way, for both parents, it's where are they gonna go? That's one of a big challenge with caregiving. It's like, hey, at what point is it maybe too much for them to be staying in the home, right? Some families can make it work, or they have, more assistance like respite care and all that. But ultimately, depending on like whether it's the mental or physical decline, and they end up needing more 24-hour care or needing more intense care, a higher level of care, then it's like, okay, so now like what are my options as far as the facility? So this book does touch on that, or also hiring respite care, like hiring others to take over specific areas like for the parents and like their needs. And then of course it's called Uncomfortable Physical Intimacies. I haven't gotten to that part yet, so I don't know if that's like, assistance with showers, assistance with, going to the bathroom. And if you've ever known anyone who's had the parents either stay in the home or come to the home after being, in a facility, then it's like, you probably experienced when the medical staff and professional staff come in, they're like, hey, so this is how you properly like shower, right? Or here's some rails for the bathroom, like stuff like physical. So that's what they means by like physical intimacy. So I'm still getting through this, but I think this book is really good. Like it's, there's also a long portion as well. I think Ross did like an amazing job with just kind of laying it all out. And there were some like comical moments too, like within some of the conversations, especially in the beginning, trying to make it like more lighthearted, or just kind of what the responses were from the parents, which I think is very relatable for a lot of people. And it's a hefty graphic novel too. So I definitely like this. I definitely recommend it. I love graphic memoirs too. I mean, I think it's because I'm like a visual learner. So there's something about like just seeing the pictures, seeing the expressions, and it's when it's not just text, like it's a little easier on my eyes, and I find it really enjoyable too. And it's a nice way to convey emotion, and really get a feel for what, what the experience was and what was happening at the time. So highly recommend this for pretty much anyone. Anyone who's preparing for caregiving, anyone who has, if you're kind of in that process right now, too, and you have like moments where you're not super tired, but realistically, so this is Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant by Roz Chast. So these are the 3 that I have for this live. In the future, I'll do probably a different one, a little more like self-care and stuff like that. So here's the 3 in case you didn't catch it from the beginning, so you can rewatch it. And yeah, so if you have any recommendations, any other books that you've read regarding caregiving that you'd like to share, you want me to know about, definitely comment or send me a message. If there's ones you're curious about and you're like, I don't know, what's your thoughts on this, definitely same, comment or send me a message. I am still in the process of gathering all the books recommended by viewers and by my followers, in hopes that I can make that its own live in 2021. So definitely set a recommendation. Also, the next live will be December 1st, which I can't believe is Tuesday. So that one will be my November reading wrap up, where I'll talk about all the books that I've read for the month of November. And then tonight or tomorrow, I'll be recording the podcast episode, the next podcast episode, which is a very different topic and genre from what I've been talking about. So that'll be interesting. So once that goes up and that is live, then I will post and let you guys know. Up until then, you can definitely watch all the ones that are up since then: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, Stitcher, Radio Public, YouTube, and then also the website, Books Between Sessions. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a good rest of the weekend.